Christmas lights blinked softly outside my apartment window, their colors reflecting faintly against the glass, like distant memories trying to come alive. Snow fell slowly, quietly, just the way my thoughts moved this time of year. I sat alone at the small dining table, 2 empty chairs across from me. Every Christmas I set them there. One for my mother, one for my father. I was 35 now. Too old, people said, to still feel this hollow. But grief doesn't listen to age. It doesn't follow calendars. It waits patiently, then returns every December, like an uninvited guest who knows exactly where you live. I poured myself a cup of tea and watched the steam rise, imagining my mother's voice telling me it was too hot to drink yet. She always worried, even about the smallest things, especially about me. My father would have laughed, tapping the table with his knuckles, pretending not to care, but always staying until the very end of dinner, just to make sure I finished eating. They were gone now. Years gone. A car accident on a winter highway. Black ice. One phone call. A silence that never truly ended. The world moved on. I didn't. Outside, families walked past my window. Arms linked, laughter floating through the cold air. Somewhere nearby, a child rang a bell, and the sound cut straight through my chest. I stood up and walked to the window, resting my palm against the glass. "Mom, Dad." "Another Christmas," I whispered. "I'm still here." I talked to them every year like this. Not out loud, never loud. Just enough for my heart to hear. I told them about my job, the promotions that didn't feel like victories, the apartment that felt too big, the life that looked complete from the outside. I never told them how lonely it felt. There was a small box on the shelf beside the window. Inside were old photos, Christmas mornings, torn wrapping paper, my mother smiling mid-laugh, my father pretending to be serious while wearing a ridiculous Santa hat. I took one photo out and sat back down. "Do you see me?" I asked the empty room. Did I do okay? The clock ticked. The heater hummed. Snow continued falling. No answers came, but somehow the silence felt familiar, almost gentle. I closed my eyes and let it surround me. Another Christmas had passed, and once again I spoke to my parents in silence. Chapter 2. The house that still knows my name. The house hadn't changed. That was the first thing I noticed as I stood on the sidewalk. Suitcase beside my feet, breath fogging the winter air. Same white porch railing. Same crooked mailbox that leaned slightly left, as if it had grown tired of standing straight. Even the old oak tree in the front yard still dropped its leaves in the same uneven pattern, covering half the driveway but sparing the steps. It had been 10 years since I last stood here. 10 years since Christmas smelled like cinnamon rolls and pine needles, instead of cold hotel rooms and reheated coffee. I didn't know why I came back this year. Maybe it was the silence. Maybe it was the way December always pulled memories out of hiding, no matter how carefully I'd buried them. Or maybe I was finally tired of pretending that moving on meant forgetting. I unlocked the door with the spare key I'd never returned. The lock clicked softly like it recognized me. Inside, the air was stale but familiar. Dust hung in thin layers over furniture that hadn't been moved in years. The living room still held the same couch where my father used to fall asleep every Christmas Eve, the same armchair where my mother wrapped gifts late into the night, insisting she wasn't tired. I set my suitcase down slowly, as if sudden movement might disturb the ghosts. The clock on the wall was frozen at 2:17. I remembered the sound it used to make, tick, tick, tick. Steady and patient, like my father's advice. I reached up and replaced the batteries I'd bought on the way. The ticking returned, filling the room. For a moment, I just stood there. "Hi, Mom," I whispered. No answer. "I'm home." The silence didn't feel empty. It felt full, heavy with words that had nowhere to land. I walked into the kitchen. The table still bore faint scratches from years of family dinners, school projects, and one particularly disastrous Christmas when I'd tried carving the turkey for the first time. I smiled despite myself. "You remember that, right?" I said aloud. "I almost burned the house down." I could hear my father's laugh in my head. Deep, warm, unafraid. I opened the fridge out of habit. Empty, of course. Still, I stood there longer than necessary, as if expecting my mother's voice behind me, telling me I'd ruined my appetite. That was the thing about grief. It didn't scream anymore. It whispered. Later I found the box. It was in the hallway closet, tucked behind old coats and a pair of boots that no longer fit anyone. A cardboard box labeled in my mother's handwriting. Christmas. My hands trembled as I carried it to the living room. Inside were ornaments I hadn't seen since I was 20. A wooden snowman with a chipped smile, a glass star wrapped carefully in newspaper, a photo ornament with my parents and me. Taken the last Christmas we were all together. I sat on the floor, back against the couch, and held the photo. You both look so happy, I murmured. I didn't even notice back then. I notice now. Every missed phone call. Every "I'll visit next year." Every Christmas I chose work over coming home, convinced there would always be more time. There wasn't. The sun dipped lower, painting the room in gold and shadow. Outside, snow began to fall softly, dusting the world in white. The house creaked as if stretching after a long sleep. I finally set up the tree. It was smaller than I remembered, or maybe I'd just grown heavier with years. Each ornament carried a memory, and by the time I finished, my chest ached in that familiar, quiet way. I turned off the lights and sat in the dark, letting the tree glow. "I talk to you every Christmas," I said softly. In my head, in my dreams, sometimes out loud when no one's around. The lights blinked gently. "I don't know if you hear me," I continued, "but I hope you know. I'm trying. I'm still here." Outside, the snow kept falling. Inside, for the first time in years, I didn't feel completely alone. Chapter 3. The Chair That Stayed Empty. Christmas morning arrived quietly, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Snow rested on the rooftops like a thin blanket of forgiveness, softening sharp edges, hiding cracks beneath white silence. I woke up before the alarm, the way I always did on days that mattered too much. The apartment was cold. Not the kind of cold that hurts the skin, but the kind that settles in places no heater can reach. I brewed coffee out of habit, even though I rarely drank it anymore. My mother used to say, "Christmas mornings deserve warmth, even if it's just in a cup." I poured 2 mugs before realizing my mistake. One sat untouched on the table, steam rising slowly, like it was waiting for hands that would never reach it. The chair across from me stayed empty. It always did. I carried the small Christmas tree from the corner and placed it near the window. Its lights flickered unevenly, one bulb dimmer than the rest. My father would have noticed immediately. He had an eye for small imperfections. The kind that most people ignore but somehow define everything. "Fix it before it breaks completely," he used to say. I didn't fix the bulb. I let it flicker. Outside, families walked past the building, parents holding children's hands, couples laughing, someone dragging a Christmas tree too big for their car. Their voices floated upward, muffled by distance and glass. I watched without jealousy, without anger, only a quiet ache. I set the table for 3. I told myself every year I wouldn't do it again. Every year I failed. Plates aligned neatly, cutlery placed just right. Napkins folded the way my mother taught me when I was too young to understand why details mattered. "This is how you show love," she'd said. "Even when no one sees." I sat down and closed my eyes. In the silence, memories came uninvited. My father lifting me onto his shoulders so I could place the star on top of the tree. My mother humming while wrapping gifts, pretending she wasn't terrible at keeping surprises. Their laughter filling rooms that now echoed. They never raised their voices. They never missed a Christmas. They never left without saying goodbye. The clock ticked louder than it should have. I picked up my phone and opened the Notes app, a habit I'd formed years ago. I titled the page, "Things I Wish I Could Say Today." I typed slowly. "Mom, I finally learned how to forgive myself. Dad, I stopped running from who I am. I wish you could see the man I became, not because of my success, but because of my peace." My hands shook, but I kept writing. "I still talk to you. I hope that's okay. I still set the table. I still save your seats." A tear fell onto the screen, blurring the words. I wiped it away, not in shame, but in respect. Tears were proof that something mattered deeply enough to hurt. Later that evening, I stepped outside. Snowflakes fell gently, landing on my coat, my hair, my eyelashes. Each one vanished the moment it touched warmth. Just like moments, just like people. The city glowed with holiday lights, but I walked past them, choosing a quiet street instead. There was a small park at the end of the block, one we used to visit when I was a child. I sat on a frozen bench and looked at the sky. "I hope you're warm," I whispered. "I hope you're together. I hope you know I didn't forget." The wind answered by rustling the bare branches above me. For the first time, the silence didn't feel heavy. It felt shared, I stood up, brushed the snow from my coat, and walked back home, not away from the pain, but alongside it. Because grief, I had learned, wasn't something you healed from. It was something you learned to carry gently. That night, before sleeping, I left the lights on the tree glowing. I didn't turn them off like usual. Some memories deserve to stay awake. Chapter 4. The empty chair at the table. Christmas Eve arrived quietly without announcement, like a guest who knew they weren't really welcome but came anyway. The city was glowing. Houses blinked with lights. Stores played soft carols. Couples walked hand in hand, laughing into scarves, breath fogging the air. Every reflection in every window reminded me that the world kept celebrating, whether I was ready or not. I stood in my kitchen, staring at the dining table. I'd set it for 3. I didn't realize I was doing it until it was already done. 2 chairs across from mine, plates placed carefully. Napkins folded the way my mother used to fold them, corners tucked in. Precise, almost ceremonial. The tablecloth was the same one she loved. I had found it in a box months ago, still smelling faintly like detergent and thyme. I sat down slowly. The chair to my right, my father's place, was empty. He always sat there, always. He would tap the table impatiently, pretending he wasn't hungry while clearly starving. He'd make a joke about how Christmas food tasted better when you complained about it. The chair to my left, my mother's, felt heavier somehow, like it remembered her presence more clearly. She used to touch my arm when she laughed. She used to remind us to slow down, to appreciate the moment. I whispered, "Dinner's ready." The silence answered me back. I tried to eat. I really did. But each bite felt wrong, like I was betraying something sacred. My fork hovered over the plate more than it moved. The sound of metal against ceramic echoed too loudly in the empty room. Halfway through, I stopped. I looked at their chairs again. "I had a good year," I said softly, unsure why I was explaining myself. "I finally got that promotion. I bought a car that doesn't make weird noises anymore. I sleep better now, most nights." I waited. Nothing. My throat tightened. I pushed my chair back and stood up abruptly, as if staying any longer would break something inside me that I'd worked so hard to hold together. I carried my plate to the sink and left it there, untouched. Later that night, I stepped outside. Snow had begun to fall, slow, quiet, respectful. The kind of snowfall that didn't rush, that didn't demand attention. Streetlights turned each flake into something golden, something fragile. I walked without direction. Every house I passed told a story I wasn't part of anymore. Laughter leaking through windows, shadows moving behind curtains. Families gathered around warmth, both physical and emotional. I stopped in front of one house where a father lifted a small child onto his shoulders, spinning him under the porch light. The child laughed so freely, so safely. My chest ached. I remembered being that child. I remembered sitting on my father's shoulders, holding onto his hair, convinced nothing bad could ever happen as long as I was that high above the ground. I hadn't realized how quickly shoulders disappear. I reached the park near my old neighborhood, the one we used to visit every Christmas Eve. My parents believed traditions mattered, even small ones. We would walk here every year, no matter how cold it was, no matter how busy life became. The bench was still there. I sat down, brushing snow from the wooden slats. "I came back," I said quietly. "I don't know why, I just didn't want this night to pass without saying something." The wind moved through the trees like a slow breath. "I used to think time would make this easier," I admitted. "Everyone said it would. They said grief fades. But it doesn't fade, does it? It just changes shape. It becomes quieter, heavier, something you carry instead of something that crushes you." I looked up at the dark sky. "I miss you," I said simply. "Not just on holidays, not just when I'm lonely. I miss you when something good happens. When I want to call someone, when I want to say, 'You were right.'" My voice cracked. "I talk to you both all the time," I confessed. "In my head. In the car. In the shower. I answer questions the way I think you would. I imagine what advice you'd give me. I hope that counts for something." Snow gathered on my coat unnoticed. "I promise I'm trying," I continued. "I'm trying to live well. I'm trying to be kind. I'm trying to not let the silence turn me bitter." I stood up slowly. "Another Christmas passed," I said, "and I'm still talking to you in silence. But maybe that means you're still here in some way." I took one last look at the bench. For the first time that night, the ache didn't feel like it was swallowing me whole. It felt like a companion, sad but familiar. A reminder that love doesn't disappear just because voices do. As I walked home, snow crunching beneath my boots, I realized something important. The empty chairs weren't empty because love was gone. They were empty because love had nowhere left to sit. And maybe that meant it was time for me to carry it forward. Chapter 5. The year I almost forgot them. By the 5th Christmas without my parents, something dangerous began to happen. Not anger, not sadness, but forgetting. It started subtly. I didn't visit the cemetery as early as I used to. I told myself I'd go later. I didn't play my mother's favorite carols while cooking. I chose a podcast instead. I didn't set out 2 extra plates at dinner anymore. Life had slowly learned how to move forward without asking for permission. And that scared me more than grief ever did. That year, December arrived quietly. No dramatic snowfall, no sudden memories crashing into me. Just a calendar date changing, like any other month. I woke up one morning and realized it was December 20th, and I hadn't thought about my parents once. I sat on the edge of my bed staring at my hands, feeling hollow. "How can I miss you less?" I whispered to the empty room. What kind of child forgets? Work was busy. Friends invited me to parties. Stores were full of laughter and music. The world felt alive. And I felt like I was betraying something sacred by blending in. On Christmas Eve, my phone buzzed nonstop. "You coming tonight?" "We're doing Secret Santa." "Don't be alone, man." I typed excuses. Not feeling well. Maybe next year. The truth was simpler. I was afraid that if I didn't feel pain, it meant my love was fading. That night, I stood in my kitchen holding a mug of coffee gone cold. Snow drifted past the window, quiet and soft. For the first time, I couldn't remember the exact sound of my father's laugh. I panicked. I closed my eyes, forcing memories forward. But they came blurry, like old photographs left in the sun too long. "Please," I said out loud, voice breaking. "Don't let me forget you." That's when I noticed the old box on the top shelf. I hadn't opened it in years. Inside were letters my mother used to write me when I left for college. Notes my father slipped into my backpack before road trips. Birthday cards. Grocery lists with little hearts drawn beside my name. I sat on the floor, surrounded by paper and dust and memories. And I cried, not because they were gone, but because they had once been so real. One letter stopped me. My mother's handwriting, familiar and warm. "If there ever comes a time when remembering us hurts less, don't feel guilty. It means you're living, and that's all we ever wanted." I pressed the paper to my chest and let the tears come freely. Maybe forgetting wasn't betrayal. Maybe it was survival. At midnight, I lit a single candle and placed it by the window. "I didn't forget you," I said softly. "I just learned how to breathe again." Outside, snow continued to fall, gentle, forgiving. And for the first time in years, I felt peace without fear. Chapter 6. Learning to breathe without you. The snow fell gently that evening, the kind that didn't rush or scream against the ground. It drifted slowly, quietly, as if the world itself was trying not to disturb the memories resting inside me. I stood outside my apartment, keys still in my hand, staring up at the sky. The streetlights glowed warm yellow against the cold blue night. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel the urge to run inside and hide. I breathed. For a long time, I didn't know how to do that without pain. Grief had trained me to hold my breath, waiting for something that would never return. Waiting for your voices, your laughter, your footsteps down the hallway. Waiting for Christmas mornings that no longer existed. But tonight was different. Inside my coat pocket was an old photo. You, Mom and Dad, smiling. Like nothing in the world could ever break us. I carried it everywhere now, not as a wound, but as proof. Proof that love had once lived loudly. I walked instead of driving, letting the cold air touch my face. Every step felt like a quiet conversation with myself. "You're still here," I reminded myself. They didn't take that away. For years I believed surviving meant betraying you. That laughing again meant forgetting. That happiness was something I wasn't allowed to touch anymore. But grief doesn't want us to disappear with it. It wants us to carry love forward. I stopped at the small park near my childhood home. The benches were dusted with snow, untouched, waiting. I sat on the one where Dad used to rest while pretending he wasn't tired, where Mom would scold him for not wearing gloves. I smiled. It didn't hurt like it used to. "I'm trying," I whispered into the quiet night. "I'm really trying," and for the first time I meant it without guilt. I had started small this year, saying yes to invitations, Cooking meals instead of surviving on coffee. Letting silence exist without filling it with pain. Healing didn't arrive like a miracle. It came like learning to walk again. One step, then another. I thought about how you raised me, not with perfection, but with presence. With the kind of love that didn't demand anything in return. You taught me kindness without knowing it would be my survival tool one day. I still miss you, I said softly. Every day. The snow answered with silence, but not the lonely kind. The peaceful kind. I stood up and brushed the snow from my coat. As I walked back, I noticed something new. Lights glowing in other windows. Families laughing. Someone practicing piano badly but happily. Life was still happening. And maybe, just maybe, I was allowed to be part of it again. Back in my apartment, I placed your photo on the shelf instead of hiding it in a drawer. I lit a small candle beneath it, not out of sadness, out of gratitude. This Christmas, I said, I'll carry you with me, not behind me. The candle flickered gently, steady and warm. And for the first time in a very long time, I slept without tears. Chapter 7. The quiet Christmas, I finally let them rest. Snow fell softly that Christmas night, the kind that muted the world instead of decorating it. The city lights outside my window blurred into warm halos. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel the urge to speak out loud to the empty room. I still missed my parents, but the ache had changed. It no longer screamed. It breathed. I had spent every Christmas talking to them in silence, replaying memories like fragile ornaments, Dad's laugh when the turkey burned, Mom's careful wrapping paper folded for reuse. The way they believed the world would be kind to me if I stayed kind to it. After they were gone, kindness felt like a language nobody spoke anymore. I kept speaking it anyway. That evening, I placed 2 candles by the window. Not as a ritual of grief, but as a sign of gratitude. For years, my Christmas conversations with them were filled with questions. Why did you leave so early? Did I disappoint you? Am I doing enough to be proud of? This year, I didn't ask anything. I told them what I had learned. I told them I had finally forgiven myself for surviving when they couldn't, for laughing again, for choosing joy without guilt. I told them that love doesn't disappear when people do. It changes shape. It becomes the patience you show strangers, the courage to start over, the warmth you pass forward when the night feels endless. I stepped outside, letting the cold sting my cheeks. The neighborhood was quiet, no parties, no noise, just a few windows glowing like promises. Somewhere down the street, a piano played softly, a simple melody that felt unfinished on purpose. I stood there and breathed, counting the exhale like Dad taught me when I was anxious. For the first time, I realized I wasn't talking to my parents anymore. I was carrying them with me. Inside, I brewed tea and sat by the tree. The ornaments weren't perfect, neither was I, and that was the point. I opened a small notebook, the same one. I used to write letters to them, and wrote a final line for the year. I'm okay, and because of you, I always will be. When midnight came, I didn't feel the usual crash of loneliness. Instead, there was a gentle stillness, like a room after good guests leave, quiet but full. I blew out the candles, whispered thank you, and went to bed without fear of the morning. Another Christmas had passed. I still talked to my parents in silence, but now, the silence answered back with peace.